order the Monday, November 13th meeting of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Chris, you want to call roll?
Sure. Chair Ravazio,
Here.
Vice Chair McPherson,
Here.
here. Committee Member Garza, here. Committee Member Anjanati,
Here.
Committee Member Knopfsteiger, here.
Okay, great, thank you. Join in with the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We now have open time from the public regarding anything that is not on the agenda. So if there's any member of the public here who wishes to speak about an item not on the agenda, now is the time to do it. Okay, it sounds like most of our members of the public are here to speak about items on the agenda. Okay.
I have one online.
Oh, we have one online. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Jean, you can unmute yourself.
And when I say limited,
Everyone, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I wanted to give a shout out and thank you very much to both Safe Routes to Schools Task Force, the town of Corte Madera, the BPAC, and the staff of Public Works at Corte Madera for putting in the activated blank out no right turn arrow and leading pedestrian interval on the Warnham path at Redwood Highway. It's a wonderful safety improvement. Thank you so much. Look forward to getting a little tweak to get even better, but it's great. It really helps. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Anyone else?
No one online.
Okay. Then we will close open time and we will move on to the next item, approval of the minutes of the September 11th meeting. Are there any changes or additions to the meeting minutes from September 11th? Okay, is there a motion to approve? We'll move to approve the minutes from last meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I will withhold a vote because I was not in that meeting. Okay, committee member reports. Are there any committee members who have a report that they wish to give? Not hearing any. Okay, then we'll move on to presentations. The Hart Street Connector Path by BKF Engineers.
Okay. Actually, I'll let Becky share the presentation.
Right, I'm gonna get this pulled up, Chris. All right, you guys able to see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we're bringing back the Hart Street Connector Path, to give an update and just to get a little bit more feedback from the public and BPAC. So we're just going to give brief presentation on where we're at now, on the results of our public outreach, and just a few more details. So I'm going to hand it off to Becky Dower at BKF Engineers and Bree Adams with Bree Sea Transportation to go over the project.
Right, thank you for that introduction, Chris. So as Chris had noted, we have brought this project to BPAC back a little bit earlier this year, back in May. That was following a public outreach event that we had. But I'll give you a refresher because it's been a number of months since you've seen this project. What this project entails is the development of a small connector path that will connect the Hart Street neighborhood to the existing bike route nearby. There's an existing sort of goat trail that connects the neighborhood to the bike path. So we're looking to formalize that connection as well as to make that connection accessible and readily usable by the neighborhood. A couple of the key goals include making that pathway accessible for all users. So not just walkers or mountain bikers, but cyclists of all skills, folks who have mobility issues or in wheelchairs. So really to make that a nice, gentle pathway connection from the neighborhood up to the bike route. We also understand that there are a number of avid cyclists who speed down that hill and towards the Hart Street Pepper Palm intersection. So we want to look at some improvements to help control cyclist speed and direction so that we can, prevent any collisions in that area between cyclists and other users. And we also want to improve vehicle circulation and incorporate some traffic calming at the Hart Street, Palm Avenue, Pepper Avenue intersection. We'll take a look at that here in just a minute, but it's a really interesting intersection that needs some form of control to help really formalize the traffic patterns in that area. So today we are here to give you an update on where we are with the project. Again, we have gone out to the public. We received some feedback from the public and we have incorporated that feedback. So we wanted to show you what that looks like at this point in time. And then we also wanted to give the BPAC an opportunity to give us some additional feedback on the project as we look to taking the pathway connector from planning into design. All right, let's start with a quick discussion about what the existing conditions look like out here. So this is the intersection of Palm, Hart, and Pepper. You can see it's sort of a skewed intersection. There's not a straight shot through here. There's some sightline issues perhaps, although the speeds out here are relatively slow. This is a neighborhood setting. The pathway connector portion of the project aims to take pedestrians and cyclists, users on Hart Street, and connect them up to this bike route here. So this is that existing goat path that I mentioned. It's a rather steep dirt or gravel path. It's an informal path that the neighborhood has developed. So it gives us a good idea of the fact that there are a lot of users in this area, seeing as they have developed their own pathway. Some other things that are noteworthy. You might be able to see there's a series of contour lines on here. There's a lot of topography so there's a lot of elevation difference between the bike route and Hart Street. So that becomes a challenge when we look at making this pathway connector accessible. We can't necessarily just replicate this existing pathway because it's far too steep to be accessible. We're looking at something that's less than 5% slope, so a very gradual slope. There are these are the property boundaries that you can see here in the dash dot line type right here. That existing gravel path actually cuts through private property. That private property owner has adapted their fence so that it is outside of the pathway, interestingly enough. But this is a condition that we're not looking to perpetuate in terms of, having public access across that private property. Other background includes knowing that, let me go back a slide. Hart Street, while it is labeled as a street, it really functions more like an alley. Based on feedback that we got from the neighbors, as well as just reviewing the conditions out there, Hart Street is quite narrow and really only provides access to the back of a couple of homes. You can't go more than, I think it's 4 or 5 homes back before Hart Street or Hart Alley really dead ends. You can see in this area here where I have my cursor, it's about 8 or 9 feet wide, quite narrow. Up near the intersection, Hart Street widens out to about 14 or 15 feet. Of those couple of neighbors that use Hart Street, this property owner in particular makes use of Hart Street because they use Hart Street to get into their garage. So take note of, these are some pavers here. These are existing pavers that neighbor had put in as sort of a driveway into their garage. So we don't have a lot of traffic here. We don't have any connections that Hart Street makes for vehicles, but we do have a couple of residents that do make use of Hart Street to get to the backs of their property. When we had brought this project out to the public, we put together 3 different alternative layouts to review with the public. So I'll go over those quickly with you. This one up in the upper left corner, this represents the existing condition. So this shows the unimproved gravel driveway that is Hart Street. It shows that existing path cutting the corner of the property. It shows the lack of any sort of improvements over by the intersection. The first exhibit that we put together and that we reviewed with the public put the pathway on the south side. Over towards your left is north. I should have mentioned that. Over towards your right is the south side. So it put the pathway over on the south side of Hart Street and then meandered up. We've got a long length of pathway so that we can get a flatter slope as we go up those contours. And then included a number of improvements at the intersection, such as curb ramps, striping and signage improvements to really reinforce how that intersection should function. On exhibit 2, we flopped the path over to the north side of the pathway. Same meandering action here with the pathway on the north side. We were able to get a more dramatic curvature of the pathway, which is a nice feature when it comes to controlling cyclist speed. Similar connection up onto the existing bike route, similar improvements in the intersection. And then the third exhibit that we prepared, the third alternative we looked at, had the path also on the north side, but this one continued to cut the corner, so to speak, of that private property to give a more direct, streamlined connection up to the existing bike route. We put this together with the understanding of this owner might be amenable to providing some sort of easement or right of way to the town if the town and other groups were interested in seeing a much more, streamlined sort of slip line bike route, as opposed to one that is a little bit longer and has more curvature and meander to it. Well, we brought these out to the public. We actually met on site with a number of members of the public to look at the concepts and then look at the actual project area with everybody. We got a really good turnout. We had 15 very involved participants who gave us lots of feedback, both verbally and in terms of markups on boards that we have brought out to the site. We had learned quite a bit from that outreach as well. We saw there was a strong preference for the path on the north side of Hart Street. So that's the same side that it currently is on, opposite of where we had that neighbor with the pavers into their garage. Particularly interesting is we heard a call to keep Hart Street gravel, and there was no interest that was expressed in having that road be paved. A lot of the neighbors cited that they want to maintain that small alley-like feel. They don't want people driving back there thinking they could actually get anywhere, and they don't want cyclists being able to hit really high speeds as they come down the hill and onto Hart Street. So they want to maintain that gravel surfacing on the roadway. We heard that there's a preference towards having a concrete driveway approach or a driveway apron at Hart Street, so that Hart Street doesn't necessarily feel like it's part of that intersection with Palm and Pepper, and that feels more like a driveway. Again, reinforcing that notion that this is really an alleyway or a private driveway. It's not an intersection. It's not a road that's going to take users anywhere. We heard a request for traffic calming at the intersection, and this is both for vehicles and cyclists. We didn't observe particularly high vehicle speeds in this area, but as you saw when we looked at the existing conditions, the intersection you're not directed straight through it. So you do have to make some movements to meander through the intersection. Neighbors were interested in seeing some traffic calming so people don't make those movements particularly quickly. We didn't hear any need to have vehicle turnarounds on Hart Street. That's due to the fact that there's only a couple people who use Hart Street and they turn around their vehicles around in their own backyards. We heard a request to investigate some drainage improvements. There's an existing drainage way and an inlet back there, and some of the neighbors want to see some, basically some routine maintenance done on that drainage. It's sort of questionable if that's actually a city maintained facility or not, but that was some feedback that we heard. And then we also had some interest expressed in having a staircase connection for pedestrians, so that pedestrians don't necessarily have to walk up and down the pathway, but can use a staircase to shorten their path of travel. So in response to those comments from the public, we have developed this preferred alternative. The one thing that is absent from this preferred alternative is a staircase connection. The staircase connection could fit in quite nicely right here between the pathway and the bike route. But we've omitted it at this time just due to anticipated potential funding shortfalls for the project. But we have investigated the feasibility of a staircase, and it's absolutely feasible. And it would live in this general location here. So I'm going to walk through a couple slides that spell out some of these improvements in a little bit more detail. First of all, at the intersection, a lot of the residents were interested in seeing a driveway. So we've incorporated a standard concrete driveway approach that really does give this a feel of like it's a private driveway or an area that you don't necessarily just go exploring, because this road, again, doesn't get you anywhere, just to the back of a few homes. We did hear feedback about controlling cyclist speed. There's a belief that a lot of cyclists currently come down this gravel trail here and generally careen across Hart Street and into the intersection. So there were neighbors that expressed a desire to keep the cyclists more controlled, control their speed and control their path of travel. So one of the ways that we have addressed that feedback is incorporating a curb that separates the pathway from Hart Street. So I've got a blow up here. This is a rendering of what that curb might look like. We'd anticipate that the curb stands up about 6 inches above Hart Street, as well as 6 inches above the path, so that you can't just easily drive off the curb and onto Hart Street. Certainly a skilled cyclist could, bunny hop or jump over that curb, but we do believe that the curb would encourage a lot of users to stay on the pathway, make it over towards the driveway, and then enter the intersection either at the driveway near a stop sign, or some users might be inclined at that point just to use the curb ramp and the crosswalk to continue their path. With the pathway on the north side, it gave us opportunities to add in some additional curvature to the path. So instead of having the straight shot, especially clipping the corner of this person's property right here, we had elected to add some additional curvature to address the request to have traffic calming for cyclists coming down the hill. So we have exaggerated this curvature a bit here in the effort to slow people as they're descending down the bike path towards Hart Street. Since there is a lot of terrain and we are trying to make a pathway that's relatively gradual slope, about 5% slope, there is some amount of earthwork and retaining walls that are needed to support this path. It's actually a very similar concept to an existing bike path that's just about a half mile away, I think, in the city of Larkspur. I think that might be their bike path. I've got an image of it here that shows that particular path. But we do have a number of retaining walls. Our goal with this project is honestly to build as much project as we can with some relatively limited funds. And so one way that we're doing that is looking for ways to minimize the height of the retaining walls. So what we have done is we've created a layout of the pathway as well as of the grading that allows us to have retaining walls that are 3.5 feet or shorter. So relatively short retaining walls here. We don't have a preferred retaining wall type selected per se. We've got a couple of images up here of potential retaining wall types. One being a timber pile wall, gives more of a natural look since this area is generally wooded. It's not particularly fun to paint graffiti on, is another benefit of this type of wall. Of course, we also have an option to go with a more standard concrete cantilever cast in place wall, similar to this one here. So a couple ideas of what that wall might look like. Again, about 3.5 feet or less in height for the wall. A couple other noteworthy features: Hart Street remains gravel. We're not planning on widening Hart Street. We're going to honor its existing width and then resurface it with some fresh gravel. And then the drainage improvements, what we're showing is there's an existing valley gutter here. It's rather an earthen ditch. It's not really a valley gutter. What we'd be looking to do is install a portion of valley gutter, probably for the last 20 or 30 feet of that drainage ditch. Provide another inlet and a storm drain, another pipe connection to the existing storm drain system here, with the intention of this area allowing for the collection of and deposition of sediment before it makes it into the storm drain system, because that's been causing some concerns with the neighbors. All right. Now I'd like to turn it over to Bree to talk about some of the improvements for vehicle and pedestrians in the intersection.
Great. Thanks, Becky. So some of the intersection improvements are adding a new high visibility crosswalk across Palm Ave, which will connect pathway users in an accessible area rather than just allowing them to kind of maneuver through the street. Adding some striping upstream and downstream of the crosswalk to channelize users approaching the intersection. So we're adding center lines on all approaches, adding some sharrows to alert for the presence of cyclists. And then changing Palm Avenue, the southbound approach near the driveway, changing that to a stop controlled intersection, just to better control the intersection and make for slower movements in the environment, and helping to connect all users in this area. And then lastly, we've added some signage upstream and downstream to alert the presence of not just pedestrians, but also cyclists. And you can see that with the ped and bike images on the side. Back to you, Becky.
Thank you. All right, to wrap things up, we've got a nice rendering here for you to show what the pathway might look like if you're standing on Hart Street and looking up towards that existing bike route. You can see it's an asphalt pathway. It's starting to climb in elevation here. It's a really gradual slope. This is, again, less than 5%, a slope that is generally accepted as accessible for wheelchairs, walkers, people using walkers. It's easy walking terrain. We do have retaining walls to help support that slope. We're generally going up, I think it's about 11 feet in total elevation. So as you turn around the corner, the pathway continues up for several hundred feet before meeting up with that existing bike path.
All right, thank you, Becky and Bree. So that's the current status of the project. We have for alternative that we came up with from doing the outreach, and so just wanted to get any other comments or feedback on the current. And just so you know, you don't need to use those.
Okay.
The owl picks up everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've done this long. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for the presentation. Let's start first off with any questions from members of the BPAC, from the engineering firm. Does anybody have any questions? That's good. No questions. No questions. Yes.
Is there at the backside of the property that's, I guess, on the south side of Hart Street, is there any type of easement along that back portion?
Is that where the path currently goes up? Like
So yeah, where the path goes up and then the drive goes around, makes the turn. Yeah. So
Public property.
I believe it's all public right away.
That's town property.
like all the are there?
Yeah, I think that's all within our right of way.
I'm pretty sure that's town property. But that's your.
Yeah. Well, Becky, can you confirm? I think that's all public right away, correct?
Yeah, that is all public right away. Anything outside of, these heavy dash lines that we showed, this is all public right of way. So that takes Hart Street all the way up to its terminus, probably like 4 or 5 homes down, and that's where the public right of way, sort of off image there, ends.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions there? Cheryl, any questions?
Yeah, would you throw up the intersection diagram again? And I'm just wondering what other alternatives besides what you show there were considered? Were you looking what other kinds of alternatives, and especially the stop sign? Did you consider not having the stop sign? Is there a way to calm traffic without a stop sign? That's, I guess, my question.
Yeah.
I think, oh, go ahead.
If you've got something, Chris, go for it.
Oh, well, I mean, I think we talked about several options, but just the way it is right now with it's free flowing from 3 different directions and it's a skewed intersection. So especially, now that we're channelizing bikes that will be coming out of that driveway, we felt that the bikes should have to stop before, entering the intersection. It's another way to calm the speed, but yeah, Becky or Bree, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That one of the considerations was if we have cyclists coming down Hart Street or down the pathway and they want to use this driveway to get on the road, we do want to stop them. This is the prevailing movement that a lot of the residents are really concerned with. Bicyclists, they say, cut through the intersection. We hadn't observed that, but we heard that feedback from the public. So looking for a way to control them here made a lot of sense. And for those that aren't going to just cut through the intersection, we do want to encourage the crossing at this location. There's not a lot of sidewalks in this neighborhood. It's not particularly walkable, and so we did want to connect the 2 walkable sides of Palm together. So this was the reasonable place to put a crosswalk, and so it made sense for us to stop vehicles so that they can take a look before proceeding potentially onto Palm across that crosswalk. Bree, if you have anything else to add, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, the only other thing is when we took counts at this intersection, we did see that people traveling between Palm and Pepper, so they're traveling northbound, making that right turn, and then southbound, making the left turn. That was the prevailing movement. And so anyone coming out of the pathway, we wanted to make sure they were queued up in an area where they could see this movement and not just dive into the intersection. So adding these center lines will channelize that movement and just help for bikes and pets to be in a safer area.
Did you consider, or I'm just not sure why the stop isn't a little bit more northerly, like yeah, where the cursor is now. Why wouldn't you put it there so that the bikes, people would stop and see bicyclists to the right?
That's a great question. Stopping vehicles that far back would make it very difficult for them to maneuver the intersection, and as well would make the visibility of any vehicles traveling down in that area on Palm not too visible to the other users. We add Shiro in right there, and we are going to be considering some additional signage. Currently where you see the letters Palm Ave, just so people are aware that that approach, there are users and coming from that area, but adding a stop bar further back would just make it harder for people to maneuver the intersection.
Any further questions, Carol? No. David?
So I have a few questions. Did anyone from BKF discuss the path with the neighbor who's adapted their fence to accommodate the current path? Second question is have cost estimates been done? I was kind of curious at what the cost differential was between 2 and 3. Is a railing required with a 5% slope, or would this be built without a railing? And then finally, while I like the curb idea, I was wondering what would happen with the drainage if you had that 6-inch curb to keep bicyclists on the bicycle path?
Right. I might need a refresher on some of the questions as we go, but let me see if I can remember them all. First question was, did we engage this property owner? This is the owner who's the path currently goes through his property, and he has adapted his fence around that path. No, we have not engaged that owner. We have attempted to reach out to that owner. Our understanding is he doesn't live in this home full time. It might be a rental home. So we had attempted to, but have not successfully engaged that owner. If this owner were agreeable to giving the town an easement or some additional right of way, that does come at a cost, unless he's a very philanthropic person who would like to make use of the path. It does represent an additional cost to acquire even a little bit of corner of his property to actually memorialize this as right of way that can be used by the public. So we didn't pursue this further once we got feedback from the members of the public that they weren't really interested in cutting that corner anyways. Second question was, or maybe it wasn't the second question, but one of the questions was, do we need a railing on this pathway? We're required to have a railing when there could be a drop of 30 inches or more. And currently we don't have any vertical drops on this pathway. So I could pull up a rendering, perhaps might be a good way to do this. But if you were traversing down this pathway, this is a gentle slope towards the path, and this is a gentle slope towards the path. This is like this is probably about a 3-to-1 slope. This slope is almost flat. It's almost a wide flat area. It's about a 15% slope. So there's no abrupt drops next to the path. So you don't need the railing. If a railing were entertained, it could be advantageous to have a railing actually up on this upper bike route, because we will be cutting soil down towards our new path. So there will be both these areas here will be steepened. It's still not a code compliant area where railing would be required, but I could understand wanting some railing in this location here. Cost estimates have been prepared for the preferred alternative, as well as a variation of the alternative that include the staircase. We are about at $400,000 for this alternative. So this does not include any cost for right-of-way acquisition. That also represents about the total budget for the project. Adding in the staircase added in about another $100,000. So it's a pretty significant add to the project. But it's not outside we haven't ruled it out, you know. I think what we want to do is carry that as a bid alternative when we get this ready to go out to bid and see if we get favorable costs. Maybe this staircase is something that we can afford. And then the drainage piece, the curb continues up to the wall. The curb and the wall sort of meet up to each other. So that curb goes over the top of a storm drain pipe. So since we are putting the path over this existing drainage ditch, we did have to route this ditch into a hard pipe. So this pipe would be underground and the curb and the path would go right over the top of it. So it doesn't have any direct impacts to that existing drainage. We will have drainage coming off of the path, drainage coming down the path. We'll have drainage coming down this hillside. All of that water will need to be reconciled with, which we can do through openings in the curb. You know, we can have like little curb cuts or curb openings, as well as we can slope the path towards the north and allow the water to sheet flow off the path and into this inlet here. We don't have those particular elements really dialed in at this particular juncture. But I don't believe that the curb, having a continuous curb here, will impact the drainage significantly. Did I get all the questions?
You did, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Anything further? If I can just add to that, if you can leave that slide up. I just had a question, Bob Ravazio. Don't you need the wider turn instead of cutting the corner like it does now? Don't you need that wider turn to first off, make people reduce speed, but also to reduce the slope of the path?
To reduce speed, certainly. If we were to look at cutting this corner here, yes, you're right. So I guess in a nutshell, this certainly is advantageous for slowing the speeds and for getting us at sorry, my words are escaping me right now, so that the path is not particularly steep. If we cut this corner here, what we would just have to do is lengthen the run of the path before it connects with bike route 15. And then we introduce some bigger retaining walls as well. And that was something we were trying to avoid, since it became apparent to us that we're going to be really close on costs, even with short retaining walls.
And this is going to be constructed in such a way that is going to really deter people from reusing the old path and cutting the corner, right? It's going to force them to take the new path. You're going to have walls and curbs and things like that to stop anybody from trying to shortcut it.
Yeah, if you were coming down the path and you were trying to shortcut here, you'd actually have to drive up this little slope and then back down. So it would not be the preferred route. I think we could further reinforce that, with, the retaining wall ends here, but with a curb or with a railing, if that became a problem. But I think the terrain itself would not lend itself to being advantageous to cut that corner anymore.
Okay.
I think that was one thought behind the staircase, was it'd probably be pedestrians that would create a little shortcut instead of having to walk all the way down and all the way back if you were coming from town. But we're still seeing if we can fit that in the budget.
Right. The late Cindy Winter always used to point that out. You can take the shortest route possible. And that was our big concern on this particular project. So I just want to make sure we've got it set up in such a way that we prevent people from doing that.
Yeah.
If there's no further questions from BPAC, we will now listen to any public input on this project. You can step up to the microphone and introduce yourself. Yeah, go ahead. Yes,
It'll pick you up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently it's gonna pick you up.
Hi, Matt Hartzell. I have 3 comments. First, on the map where it's labeled Bike Route 15, I would recommend adding the term North-South Greenway. This is the North-South Greenway. It's a county-wide path, regional importance. The whole county, all of the jurisdictions are working towards making a complete system. So we really want to try to raise awareness of the North-South Greenway. So I'd recommend adding that label to your map. Number 2, I'm concerned that the asphalt path on Hart Street next to the gravel part of Hart Street with the 6-foot curve, that curve is not going to be enough to keep the gravel out of the asphalt path, and that you're going to have gravel spewing onto the path And unless there's regular maintenance, that's going to cause a hazard to people using the path, which maybe cause punctures in people's tires. So I don't know, maybe a higher curb or get rid of the gravel entirely. Third comment, I would recommend that the town look at concomitantly with this project, reducing the speed on Palm Avenue to 15 miles an hour. Currently, the default speed is 25 miles an hour. And some cars really take that street very fast and they make that right turn onto Palm very fast. And I believe that State Assembly Bill AB 43, or is it AB 73, does create new provisions that go into effect next June 2024 that allow more leeway for local jurisdictions to reduce the speed limits on the streets. So I'd recommend putting actual speed limit sign on that street, reducing the speed to 15 miles an hour to improve safety. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the exceptionally good behavior of your companion.
Bob Bundy, Golden Hind Passage. I'm not particularly familiar with this, but my question was, how many cyclists and pedestrians currently use this social path? And are there more anticipated with a more welcoming path?
Thank you. Is there any other further public comment? Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment. Would somebody like to address that question Mr. Bundy had, or?
Yeah, I can. Jean's got her hand up online though. So.
Okay, we have one more comment. Sorry. Keep forgetting we're doing online.
Go ahead, Jean.
Hi. Safe Routes to School was very interested in improving this path. A lot of the users are Neil Cummings students coming down it to school. So I share Cheryl's concern that the Palm Avenue traffic needs to be stopped before the path joins the street, and I'm not so concerned about the bikes having to stop down further. Did you consider anything like a traffic circle or a roundabout too? And also, I kind of regret, I don't know how tied they are to having a gravel path, but skin knees, falls, I don't know. Seems like asphalt would be a blessing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other further public comment?
No online.
Okay, then we will close public comment. There were some questions. Chris, do you want to?
Yeah. So I'll just start with Jean. That one was fresh. So I think just to clarify, the actual multi-use path will be asphalt.
Right.
Hard Street will remain gravel, but any pedestrians or bicyclists would stay on the north side in the asphalt area. So they shouldn't be riding on the gravel. And I mean, we can look into other options about the curb moving to Matthew's comment, but usually 6 inches vertical is enough to keep gravel from kicking up, especially because only 2 of the 5 houses along that stretch actually use that street. So you maybe have 2 cars going in and out every day. But yeah, we can definitely take a look to try and keep the path from having gravel on it. As far as how many users, I don't know if we have a count. I'm not sure if Becky's still on here. Becky, do you know if we've done a count for users on the path?
I'm not sure if we had a count, Bree. I don't know if we collected any pedestrians. We have, some anecdotal evidence from the neighbors that there's a fair amount of school children and like weekend recreational cyclists.
We did do, I believe, a 3-hour count, and we're showing about 60 users. If you give me a moment, I can figure out how many of those are pedestrians and how many are cyclists.
If I can address that question as well, I used to own 35 Palm where the path cuts through, and we developed it and sold it. There is a ton of traffic in the morning because that is the path Corte Madera school children use to get on the bike path to go to Hall Middle School. So it gets a lot of school traffic both in the morning and in the afternoon. It's a major thoroughfare for kids. I bet it's a lot higher than 60 on a warm day. So yeah, it's a frequently used path, and this is, well, I'll say that for comments. Anyway, okay. Any other?
I just wanted to add really quickly, 30 users were peds and another 30 were cyclists, but again, this is just in a 3-hour window. So if you scale that up to 24 hours or.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I guess we can bring it back to BPAC for comments and a vote. Do you want to comment on this or? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think it's a real important project, and like you say, for the kids going to school, but or coming from school, and it's also the alternative is going farther south, almost to Tamalpais, and then you have to make a very sharp left turn onto Redwood, and it's steep, and this would be a much better alternative.
Yeah.
Are we voting on alternatives or voicing our?
We're just
on
giving an
alternatives?
opinion.
Yeah.
We're an advisory committee.
Yeah, I mean, just when you said vote,
Well,
my opinion is that number 2 appears to be the best alternative.
okay.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Quick comment, I do think it's a great connector to Larkspur, downtown Larkspur and such. Otherwise, the alternative is you stay on the road, it's uphill, more grade, a little more arduous with little kids and bikes and such. And also I did want to comment on the shortcutting. I would look on, I guess, the north side of the path as it curves. Seems like an opportunity to shortcut on a mountain bike or such. So any type of landscaping or such that can deter that, I think it would be a great idea.
Thank you. And I would just agree. I would echo that comment. Anything to deter people shortcutting, I think would be smart. But I think this is a terrific improvement because people just blow through there and then blow right on the palm on their bikes. I mean, without slowing down at all, it's an accident waiting to happen. So this will slow people down, and I think it's a terrific improvement. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you have our input. Okay. Discussion items. 6A, e-bikes in Corte Madera on streets, sidewalks, paths, and parks. I'm assuming this was your first.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
sorry, just pulling this up. Okay. So yeah, we had a discussion in the last meeting about e-bikes, but it was mainly focused on paths. And so this one, we're bringing it back and widening it to streets, sidewalks, paths, and parks. So this slide is kind of a repeat, but I just wanted to go over this again. So the 3 defined e-bike types, type 1 is 20 miles per hour max with pedal only assist. Type 2 is 20 miles per hour max with pedal assist and a throttle. And then type 3 is 28 miles per hour max, only pedal assist. And for type 3, riders must be 16 years or older, must wear a helmet. They can't transport other riders, and they're prohibited from using multi-use paths unless otherwise specified by the local government. So this is all regulated by California. So just wanted to clarify those. Some other points, the California Vehicle Code doesn't apply to bike paths. So as it stands, if the local government doesn't have their own enforceable laws, then the police can't really do anything as far as enforcement on bike paths like they could on roads. And then California law does not regulate biking on sidewalks, and it allows local governments to create their own traffic ordinances. So those are just a few pointers. And then talking about, and I think, this topic originally came up because there's been reports of safety issues with e-bikes and teen riders. So generally, for road traffic, bike traffic, there's 3 different ways to enhance safety. That's education, engineering, or enforcement, 3 E's. So under education, right now there's 3 organizations that have e-bike resources, Marin County Bicycle Coalition, Transportation Authority of Marin, and the County of Marin, all have information on their websites, about e-bikes. I believe Central Marin Police, Department also has some online resources. And then the local school districts also have some, online resources, and they've also been just educating their students about riding responsibly, because more and more, young kids and teenagers are getting e-bikes these days, and the schools are responsible for, student safety getting to and from school. So they have some responsibility there in the education. So they've been doing some work there, but there's always, more room for improvement. On the engineering side, that usually involves larger construction projects to change, the alignment of bike paths, or, do things like add roundabouts or additional signage. But at the end of the day, there's kind of limited opportunities for low cost path enhancements that will actually, reduce speeds for people biking. So it's an option if we have, the budget to spend on it. And then finally, enforcement. Both the police department and the town don't currently have available staffing for patrolling or enforcing, in parks, paths, or sidewalks. The police are always patrolling the streets, and with that, some of the sidewalks as well. But to add additional staffing for, parks and paths would be a different matter. So, if we're considering creating ordinances, you have to also consider who's going to enforce it, because right now there's not really budget to add staff for that. So just a few, additional regulations, and just notes on e-bikes. So type 3 e-bikes, mopeds, and motorcycles cannot be ridden on sidewalks or bike paths, only in the street. And they have a lot of different definitions for different types of mopeds and everything, and motorized scooters and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of gray area that I think California is trying to improve, but that's, we're still seeing how that's going to play out. Motorized scooters can be ridden on streets or bike paths with a max speed of 15 miles an hour. And this is like an example of one down here in blue. The town currently doesn't have any ordinances regulating biking or e-biking on sidewalks, bike paths, or in parks. So technically, as it is, you can bike pretty much wherever you want, as long as you're giving way to pedestrians and following the other regulations that are out there. And then there's also a recent talk between town staff about creating an ordinance requiring bikes to stay on paved paths in the town parks. There's been a few reported instances of people riding in the grass and some close calls, so that's a topic that's come up recently. And then just want to mention some comments that were talked about in the last meeting. There's a need to differentiate between, legally defined e-bikes from electric motorbikes without pedals, or e-bikes that have been modified to go faster than the legal limits. There's a California Assembly bill being worked on to separately define electric motorbikes. And then, as I mentioned before, there was some residents reporting issues with encounters with e-bikes, riding through town parks in the grass. So that's part of what spurred the talk about new regulations, specifically in parks. So with that, that's kind of just a follow-up of what we've talked about so far, and I just wanted to open up to further discussion on any ideas.
So you're just looking to hear what we think about all this with e-bikes tonight, right? Is that? Right, Aaron? Okay.
Yeah, just continue the
Just
discussion.
want to make sure.
Mhm.
Okay, then let's start by, first off, does anybody have questions from BPAC or Chris on what was just presented? Any questions? Cheryl? Okay, no question. Okay. Is there any member of the public who has input on this topic that would like to speak before we discuss this or has questions?
I'll speak again.
Wow.
Uh,
Well, you get an A for effort, man. Wow.
So I know there's been a lot of hand wringing about e-bikes, especially teenage hoodlums on e-bikes terrorizing the community. It seems the problem is worse in Mill Valley, San Anselmo than it is here in Corte Madera. I think e-bikes are an important contribution to multimodality. We don't want to discourage people from using e-bikes or make it place undue restrictions on the use of e-bikes. I think there's a handful of e-bike riders, as there are a handful of car drivers and a handful of regular riders who don't follow the rules, who are rude, who exhibit bad behavior, and that's really what this should be about. And in the absence of capacity to better enforce laws, and maybe we don't even have laws on the bike path, so that might be kind of out of our control. But I wonder if just common sense reminders like signs might actually do the trick for the most part. I know that TAM and Safe Routes recently did, or they still are doing, the Street Smarts campaign, where they've been putting up banners rotating around different communities all across the county, reminding people on the streets how to behave. Common sense reminders. Maybe we need something like that on the bike paths as well, just reminding people on bikes that when there's people walking or jogging or pushing babies, or you slow down, you ring your bell, you treat them with courtesy and kindness and politeness. And we just need a little more of that, and maybe some visual reminders would help improve the situation. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. You know what, can I just interject a quick question?
Mhm.
Have we had a lot of complaints about e-bikes in Corte Madera?
I mean, personally, I've only received 1 or 2, and it was mainly, it was actually, well, in the last meeting, somebody brought up an issue in the park, but, I don't think a lot of the complaints get cycled through Public Works, so we don't
Okay.
hear about a lot of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Bob Bundy?
Yeah, I would agree with what Matthew says, is that some signage would really be appropriate, and I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. The Tiburon bike path, and I can't remember, David, is that 8 or 10 miles per hour is the speed limit over there on the Tiburon bike path? But it's putting a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit on the bike paths, I think along that stretch, which I ride fairly frequently, people go a little over that, but they're not going 20 miles an hour over that. Nobody's riding the Type 3 e-bikes wide open on that. So I think there has been some enforcement. I had seen one police officer out there one day, but just the signage about the speed limit. And you can also put some signage about, call out or ring your bell when you're passing, caution with, walkers and such. But I also think that we really need to do something about these Type 3 e-bikes that kids are riding, where they remove the governor or put in a chip. I'm not sure what it is that makes them go, past me when I'm going down the street in my car and they're going faster than I am. But if the rule says, if the state says that Type 3s are not supposed to be on bike paths, we should have a sign that Type 3s are not supposed to be on bike paths. If they're not supposed to, they're supposed to be on the road, they're supposed to have a helmet, and they're not supposed to have a rider with them, we should have some signage about that. So I recognize that, the police and code enforcement may not want to get overly involved in this, but some kids going to get killed out there. I mean, yeah, it's just watching them, seeing them go down. There have been accidents that I've heard of. I get a lot of complaints from people in my neighborhood, when we're just out in the front yard and they're walking by, and, then a e-bike goes by at 30 miles an hour. people are complaining, people are recognizing that this is unsafe. And it's really a small, as Matthew says, it's a small subset that are doing this. And so we have to make some rules and put up some signs for them and have some, potential degree of enforcement where an officer or code enforcement might be out there on a path periodically. But I think the signage will help a great deal.
Thank you, Mr. Bundy.
Hello, you inspired me, David Bell, Corte Madera. Since it was brought up, yeah, I do want to complain about e-bikes usage at the speeds. In my neighborhood, Marina Village, that Clemente Paradise Drive is like a drag strip for them. They use it to race cars, go, split lanes, go around, cut off cars, and especially I wish we could enforce the use of a signal or a bell. I'm walking my dog, mind my own business, and just out of the blue, they come right by me, and who knows how fast. So I wish we could enforce it. So bring this up for your awareness. Thank you.
Just a quick question. Is that happening on Paradise or on the sidewalk that we just improved a couple years ago? The new wider sidewalk?
Both.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think we heard from all the members of the public, so we'll bring it back to BPAC for discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, one more.
You got 3 on my deck.
Someday I will remember this. Today's not that day.
Okay, Patty, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I thought all of Bob Bundy's points were excellent. I want to say that when we first did the age-friendly Corte Madera survey, the thing that rose to the top of what people wanted was safe sidewalks. And it's probably 10 times that now, and that was almost 10 years ago. So if the older people are not going to feel safe walking on the sidewalk, and like you said, from out of nowhere comes this 30-mile-an-hour vehicle crashing into you or your walker or your dog or your stroller, it's terrifying. So I like the idea of signs, maybe a sign of a run over old person with bike treads on their body would get the point across. But yes, signage would be good. And of course, cameras would be good, but I don't think that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Zoe, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Zoe Reckis, Advocacy Assistant with the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Just first want to thank you guys for having this discussion. It's of course very important to a lot of members in our community, and also thank you for mentioning our education program, Teens E-Bike Smart. We're really excited to be offering that to the community in Marin here. And I also just wanted to kind of echo a few of the comments that were made earlier. E-bikes are a really important connector in our transportation system. They are a great way to get people out of cars, which of course we want to encourage. And safety for all road users is our highest priority. So really trying to focus on education over just flat out banning an entire mode of transportation based on a few bad apples. That's of course not what we want. So we're really trying to educate our teens in the community, as well as help educate our parents so that they don't buy these electric motorcycles thinking that they're putting their kid on an e-bike. That's a really important step, just to kind of nip things in the bud there. So thank you again, you guys, for having this conversation, and we're here to help support safety and education as much as we can in our capacity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we'll close public comment. And we'll bring it back to the BPAC for discussion. And you're just looking for input from us, correct?
Yeah. Basically just discussion about the
what do we do about this? If anything, go ahead.
I have
Cheryl's
an
ready to go.
opinion, yeah.
I can see
I live on Tamil Vista Boulevard, so I'm on the front row seat for a lot of bad behavior, including a kid handing his cell phone to another kid and then doing wheelies on Tamil Vista. So I know probably can't do much about that. But I am concerned about sidewalk riding because I have to back out of my driveway. And sight lines are not the greatest. There's, and it's scary. I've seen kids on these e-bikes on the sidewalk. There's a bike lane there, but they're on the sidewalk and they're going fast. And so it's very scary. I don't want to hit them. I don't want them to hit me, but I think sidewalk riding is a real problem. And especially as Patty mentioned, for older folks, we don't recover as well. And I think the town needs to address that in some fashion. And I know there's, even if it were illegal on the books to ride on the sidewalk where there's especially where there's a bike lane, we may not have the staff to enforce that, but it sends a message to the community that it's not appropriate, that it's not good and it isn't safe for the people doing it. No one's looking on the sidewalk for a rider. They're looking out on the street for a car if they're going to go exit their driveway. So I think that I don't want to discourage bike riding, but I do think that there needs to be some communication with the community about sidewalk riding is not safe.
Okay. And that just triggered a question. Chris, I'm sorry, normally I would talk to you before the meeting and go to some meetings ahead of time, but I don't know if you know or not, but Mill Valley, I know, passed a law a couple of years ago where anybody who was ticketed on an e-bike, the parent of the child had to attend a class with the child, which took like 2 or 3 hours, probably on a Saturday morning, which sound, as an to educate them about how to use the e-bike properly, which sounded to me like a great idea. And then I heard it wasn't working that well because they were having a hard time actually ticketing people and enforcing it. Have you heard anything, anything at all about the success of that? And I don't mean to put you on the spot again, but.
Well, I did hear about that, and I think we talked briefly about it the last meeting, but I haven't really heard how that's been going.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As someone else mentioned, I think LA has a bit more of a problem with it, but I think they're having issues just enforcing it to start giving out tickets. So, but yeah, I don't know how that's working out for them.
Yeah. Cheryl, did you have any other?
No, that was fine.
That's your big point.
Yeah.
Keep them off the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Anything?
I mean, yeah, we all see e-bikes, whether we're driving a car or riding a bike or walking around, and it's a big concern because I do a lot of cycling and mountain biking and walking, but the slowing down, I think, and being courteous has to be where it starts. And then certain things you see out there with these little electric motorbikes that really aren't e-bikes at all. I mean, the police or somebody needs to pull them over, I mean, the town I grew up in, if you ran your dirt bike down the road, the police would be knocking on your door and telling your parents this can't happen. But this is a whole nother spectrum of stuff. So it's common courtesy. We're in a community here, and it is scary when you're driving your car and get cut off by kids on e-bikes on, San Clemente or whatever. They just go flying down the road. And, but anyway, to me, the big thing is slow down. And these are new vehicles. And if you have one, or if your family has one, you really need to make sure that everyone in the family are being respectful, I think. Because it's a big problem. It's a big problem everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And everywhere in California or anywhere that people have e-bikes.
Right.
East Coast has problems with this. So it's not a unique problem to Corte Madera.
Right.
Okay. I agree with everything that's being said here, pretty much, but at the same time, I think it's fantastic if there's less cars, less young people in cars trying to get to high school or such, and if they can, you know, have an easy way to use e-bikes and it's encouraged, you know, I think that's a wonderful thing as well.
Okay. So it sounds like we all agree that there's a problem with e-bikes on sidewalks. There's a problem with e-bikes that are going too fast everywhere, whether on sidewalks or on roads or on bike paths. What recommendations or ideas do we have? What would you like to see the town do? Do we have any thoughts on what the town should do to try to rectify the situation? Sure.
And maybe
That's what Chris is looking for.
Yeah. So the Marin County Bicycle Coalition, perhaps Zoe's still on the line there. Their e-bike class, if you've been cited to go in Mill Valley, costs $125. And I think that citation is then presented to, or the class certificate is presented to the Mill Valley Police to, and I assume that takes it off any sort of record, but maybe Zoe could address that. It's $25 to take the class. If you have not been cited personally, and this is up to Marin County Bicycle Coalition, I wish that class was free and was pushed as much as possible to educate both parents and kids. And the second thing I was going to say is I'm just not in favor of more ordinances, local ordinances, primarily because we just don't have the police resources to actually enforce it. The majority of super fast electrified bikes, which are really motorcycles, they don't have pedals. I see them on the streets a lot, and I've never seen Central Marin Police Authority in the last year pull over anybody. And just anecdotally, a very good friend is a Marin County Sheriff, and he has on 2 occasions, and he laughs about it, he's tried to pull over groups of e-bike riders, young kids, where they were getting calls to 911. These guys are terrorizing the streets. So he goes out there, and when he tried to pull them over, he said they went 6 different directions. Nothing he could do.
Some things don't change.
Yeah,
right?
some things don't change. And so I'm just not sure that an ordinance, a local ordinance, really can do anything. I would think, Chris, that when it comes to an e-bike rider who's doing donuts in wet grass, the code enforcement officer who catches a kid doing that can still cite them for destruction of public property or some ordinance that's already existing on the books. So I don't think we have to necessarily do an additional ordinance that's specific to e-bikes. The other thing I was going to say, which I've been studying this quite a bit, is that, you know, electric scooters, you know, the razors with motors, those are required by the state of California. You're supposed to have a driver's license to use those. It doesn't make sense, but it is true. And I'm glad to hear that the legislature is going to try and address the electrified motorcycles that don't have any pedal assist. So I would say the only thing that I think the town can do relates more to the paths. And so I think it really comes down to signage that tries to instill better behavior, using bells and just being courteous to pedestrians, not in favor of any ordinance that would ban all bikes from sidewalks, because in fact, Mill Valley has an ordinance that bans bikes on all sidewalks. And of course, hundreds, if not 1,000 kids every day ride on the sidewalks in Mill Valley to get to school. And you wouldn't want to discourage that. In fact, parents want their kids to ride on a sidewalk because some of these kids are, 6 and 7 and 8, 9 years old. And
We widen the sidewalk on Paradise Drive, so kids can ride on it.
so I think if signage, listen, the Mill Valley Bike Path has great signage. And I personally have noticed better courtesy. They've also installed like the roundabout and speed signs. So I think you can affect public behavior for 80%, 90% of the people who are riding bikes on paths and sidewalks just by signage outreach. So that's really all my comments.
Okay.
Where, can I ask you, where there's a bike lane, would you be willing to tolerate sidewalk riding, and where it's actually safer to be in the bike lane than in the sidewalk?
So a kid coming from the Cove School that's going to go to, let's say, the trailer park, that lives in the trailer park, that's in 4th grade, 3rd grade, 5th grade. There's a bike lane on Paradise. So it's Sharrow's, and there's a path that they could ride in the street. I wouldn't want a young kid riding on the street. I want them to use the sidewalk. Yeah.
That's, well, along like the section in front of Nugget, that's not a bike lane there.
Okay.
But there's a widened sidewalk. We widen the sidewalk there, but I think that's just what do we call it, a fog line. I don't think that's
true. That's true. But I guess my point is I would not.
I would see where there's a bike lane, where there's an official bike lane. I don't think they should be on the sidewalk. Where there's not, like along Paradise there, it's legitimate to be on the sidewalk in that case.
At our last VPAC, I saw Tom riding his bike home at night on Chama Vista, right? And you were on the sidewalk the entire way, for reasons that you can only explain. But I mean, people ride on the sidewalks, and I'm just looking out for the youngest riders who I want to encourage to use their bikes to go to school, and they use sidewalks.
What about, if I can just interject, what about signage that ban e-bikes from sidewalks? Would that be tenable? I mean, because that.
Well, I think it depends. I mean, I normally don't ride on sidewalks because I ran the road, but if it's at night and I had blinkies, I remember that. I don't remember exactly how I rode home, but yeah, I normally don't ride on a sidewalk with my bike. But it like depends. And if you're riding with a little kid, like I've ridden with my son since he was in preschool, now he's a sophomore who can ride faster than most of the e-bikers around, town. But it kind of depends, I think, to a certain degree. Some of it's age and some of it's time of day. But yeah, I would not want to be backing out of my driveway thinking if I back out, some kid's going to hit the side of my car, because that's not good for you getting hit. That's not good for the kid that hits the car. But
I'm afraid sometimes of just walking out of my house, and if I'm not paying attention, someone's going to hit me. That's the truth.
Mill Valley doesn't have signage that says don't ride your bike on the sidewalk. They just have an ordinance.
Right.
And I would speculate that if you called up the traffic division of Mill Valley and said, how many citations did you give out for riding on a bicycle? I can't imagine that
they give out very few because they have the same problem we do. They don't have anybody to write tickets.
Yeah.
I mean, the police have lots of other things to do. They're not looking around. They're getting calls all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've trimmed our police forces down to like the minimum that we need, and so.
Thankfully, we have low crime for the police force.
We have, the police force is set up to handle the crime and the incidents that we have. But this would be an additional burden on them. And I was on the police council for a long time, so I know how they're working. I don't know if we provided any direction at all. I mean, it sounds like signage makes sense. We think?
Yeah.
As a deterrent, right?
Even if we
As far as
change
the type of signage, it sounds like we have some differences of opinion, but Does anybody want to try to summarize what types of signage? I mean, for example, speed limits on bike path, e-bikes, or what about no type 3 e-bikes on this bike path? I mean, something like that, is that something that's necessary? Or is that just not even needed?
Well, I think speed limits are great. I mean, one thing I see in this part of Marin County that I see other places I would like to see more here is on the multi-use paths to have a line that at least gives some separation, like the new awesome sidewalk there by across from Nugget. You know, some sort of a dashed line down the middle at least keeps people on both sides, and then the multi-use path that goes the whole way over towards Trader Joe's. A little hash mark in the middle, because when you go over and ride like we were just talking about the other day, we just rode at the Mill Valley Sausalito bike path, right? The old train rail road that I rode my bike on for 7 years in the city on. Years ago, there was nothing on there. In fact, it was like the Paris-Roubaix. It was so, bumpy, right? And no signage at all, no lines. And now they have some nice little hash marks, very busy, people going both directions, right? But the little bit of a dashed line down the middle and gravel on the side, if you have room like they do, is a good separator. But you still get, 4 pedestrians walking the whole way across in prime time or whatever, and then you've got to ring your bell and slow down and go around them. But any kind of marking on bike paths or sidewalks, even the Golden Gate Bridge used to not have anything. Now it does on the east side, right? And this is now ancient history. 10 years ago, they put marks on there. Before that, there were no marks anywhere. But that did help because people walking and biking both ways on that bridge.
Provide some direction control.
And you do see around, no motorized vehicles. But now what's the definition of a motorized vehicle? That used to be a dirt bike or a 4-wheeler or a car or something like that. Now it's some of these e-bikes that don't have pedals on are certainly should be a motorized vehicle, because it's not a bike of any type really if you can't pedal it. If the lines are blurring and it gets down to common sense and respect for neighbors, and we try to do that all the time. We probably all have some little offense that I was riding my bike too fast here or whatever. But if you're governing yourself accordingly, trying to do 100% of the time, then usually you're going to do pretty well.
Okay, so we think signage is a good idea. Amazing. We want to recommend some signage, sounds like.
I'll volunteer to explore and take screenshots of. There's a lot of trails all over the country where the long distance trails where they kind of encourage this common courtesy we're talking about, using bells and whatnot. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'll try and find as many pictures of signage that's supposed to encourage good behavior.
There's a lot of that right in
already on the
Mill Valley, right in Mill Valley, that where the person got hurt really bad, where now is the roundabout. Right. Go down, look there, David. They have all kinds of things, just about courtesy, and you have soccer players walking through there, and everybody's riding. But there's a lot just right there.
Okay.
That's very interesting.
This is signage for trails and paths.
Yeah.
But perhaps also we may be interested in signage keeping bikers off sidewalks.
And even something printed.
Or e-bikers off sidewalks.
Yeah.
And maybe banning certain types of e-bikes on paths, maybe something to do that as well. And then that would be our recommendation as kind of a first step to try and see what happens and see if we can perhaps alleviate some of the problems that we're seeing, and then kind of move from there.
So, I mean, yes, I think signage is a good idea, but if we're making signage for issues that we don't currently have an ordinance for, that has to come first. So for speed limits, we have to we have to do a
You
study.
can't just make them up.
Can't just pick one. We have to do a speed survey, 85th percentile. So there's some steps.
For speed limits for bikes, you have.
Yeah, same processes.
On bike paths?
Mhm. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. So
Mill Valley and Tiburon do that?
the county, I believe, did before, because they set speed limits on Mill Valley Sausalito Path. But generally, I mean, you get the 80th percentile and then you go from that. But you
Do we
can't
have to
really
do an environmental study too?
luckily, no.
What if it was more of a suggestive sign, like be kind, slow down?
I mean, that's a different thing. If you said speed limit 15 miles an hour and you wanted to be enforceable, it would have to be something that we studied and, create an ordinance on. But yeah, something like that, you could just put up. And then like dash lines or like any striping, we probably have to just make sure it's warranted first. And probably just have to know where we want to do it. If there's specific areas with issues or because, there's a lot of bike paths around town. So that's kind of the
How do you
question.
determine if, a dividing line on a path is warranted? What's the criteria?
Usually it's based off just the amount of traffic. If there's only, a few people on it every hour, then it might not be warranted to put that down. Because, like you mentioned, like Chrissy Field where they put the separate line, there's tons of people out there all the time. So that in that case it's warranted, but maybe on Paradise, in the morning there's a lot of people, but so maybe then, but the rest of the day there's not too many people using it. So we just have to look into that first before we could make that decision. And then one thing I just wanted
What about banning type 3 bikes on bike paths?
Yeah, so that's already California law,
So we can do that.
yeah. As far as I know, yes, that we could just put a sign up for that,
Okay.
because that's just citing ordinances or California law.
And I think we're in agreement that would probably be a good idea if that was a reasonable thing to do. We don't need type 3 bikes on bike paths going 30 miles an hour.
No, we don't, but, or as RJ said at the last one, I think Chris is saying now, the town doesn't really have the resources to enforce anything on the path, but
Right.
I suppose it's still.
Well,
It's still notice, right?
I think I was operating off the premise someone laid out earlier that sometimes signage is just enough and suggesting things will hopefully slow the situation down, help alleviate the situation. And that would be kind of a first step, and then if there was still a problem, then we would go to because an ordinance, creates all kinds of, and then enforcement of the ordinance. I mean, that's like a whole other thing, but if we can alleviate the problem, or at least make it less onerous than it is by signage, that seems like that would be a win, and that might, get us to the point where we can do it. So it sounds like we're talking about 2 areas. One is speed, actually 3 areas: speed, types of bikes on the bike path, and also we're talking about e-bikes on sidewalks, did we say, or all bikes on sidewalks, or e-bikes on sidewalks?
Primarily e-bikes.
E-bikes on sidewalks.
I think the younger kids are.
And again, a signage thing. I know we're all over the map here. There's all kinds of stuff going on, Chris. I apologize for that, but this is a complex issue and discussion.
Yeah.
Do you know, Chris, Tam has that program, I don't know if it's Street Smarts, you see, Eyes Up, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you know, who does that on the Tam? That, because I don't think any of their material addresses e-bikes.
No, it's mainly focused, in the roads. Because they work with us, we put up banners twice a year for them. And they give us like lawn signs that we can give out to people if they want it. But it's mostly about, riding responsibly in the road, not so much on paths.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on. I think we beat this one to death.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything else to add, or? Thank you for that input. That was terrific. Difficult discussion. I know it's hard to conceptualize this, but project updates, North-South Greenway Gap Closure Project, Tam and Larkspur.
Okay, this is, yeah, just a brief update on the north-south Greenway Gap Closure Project. And just to clarify, this is led by Tam and Larkspur. But we just wanted to give an update on the status. So the northern segment shown, the orange line here, the north part of the northern segment was completed in 2022 over, the Brewery 101 overpass. So it's this section here. So that's already completed. And then the northern segment on Redwood Highway is currently being bid by Larkspur, and construction should begin in the next few months. And that will create a multi-use path from the southern end of the new path to the Greenbrae pedestrian overcrossing right here. So that's coming up soon. They said they may start construction in the winter, but latest would be in the spring, once everything dries up. And then for the southern segment, Tam confirmed with us that they've applied for grants for that section, but so far they haven't identified funding to proceed with design. And I think there's still some questions about right of way and other issues they have to work through. So that one may be farther out. But that's the latest we have on that project.
Thank you. Any questions? Chris? Yeah.
Well, this
Sure.
has been kind of, the southern segment has been languishing for years. And I'm wondering, if the town can, the council could make a resolution just encouraging Tam and encouraging them to, I don't know if it would make any difference, but to apply for more grants or whatever, I don't know what would make a difference. But it is really, riding in front of Trader Joe's is always a heart stopper. Or, so it would be really nice to have that southern segment completed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from BPAC? I think we have one member of the public here who wants to definitely speak, I can tell, so.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry for the background noise.
He's got a baby.
I'm gonna stand over here with a visual aid.
His
So,
priority.
so a lot of people have been hoping for the southern segment to be completed for a long time, and it's suffered a lot of delays. And I think one of the main obstacles to it, just this yellow line is the southern segment. This is the one that that was just built. This is what Larkspur is about to build down to the pedestrian overcrossing. And what that leaves is a gap between the pedestrian overcrossing and Warnham Drive. And that's a gap in the north-south Greenway. And it goes through some real serious hazards. The entrance to the Trader Joe's Cost Plus Plaza parking lot, which is unsignalized, and the on and off ramps from the freeway to Lucky Drive. So it would be really great if there was a solution to close that gap, even if it's not the full southern segment, which is the green line on that map or the yellow line on my map here. And one of the main obstacles to that, I think, is that it requires an easement going through the Marin RV Park, and that RV park changed ownership recently, and I think the owner is maybe not really interested in allowing an easement. And if she's not interested, there's no way for it to happen without eminent domain, and that's not politically popular. So that's really kind of a stumbling block. I have a proposal for a near-term solution that would help to bridge this gap with these hazards here. And it would take some initiative from Corte Madera. I realize it's a TAM project, but I'd like to suggest that Corte Madera try to be proactive and go to TAM and if Corte Madera supports this idea, and that would be to forget about this part for now and just focus on this part. So this is kind of the diagonal of the old Northwestern Pacific Railroad Y. That's actually in the town of Corte Madera's town limits, and the town of Corte Madera even owns this property. This is town right of way. And it's currently a gravel path, but it's pretty narrow and bumpy, and not many people know about it. So go ahead and do the design and improve and permitting to construct this path to modern pathway standards, 12-foot wide paved class 1 pathway as far as Industrial Way. And that would be the extent of Corte Madera's part of the project. And then do some sort of improvements for the city of Larkspur to do maybe class 3, maybe class 2 on this part of Industrial Way and Rich Street, which would then connect to the new path that Larkspur is going to build here. I realize it's not maybe the ideal route going through this industrial area, but it's pretty low traffic. The concrete trucks from Rich, they only go in and out like twice a day. And this actually has the support of Council Member Kevin Carroll on the Larkspur City Council, and he's also a commissioner on the TAM Board of Commissioners. So somebody at TAM would be listening to this if Corte Madera were to maybe take this idea. But I realized it would still require the funding for the design and the permitting and the construction. And I don't know if the town has that, but if the town sees this as a feasible kind of near-term solution or compromise to try to get around this gap, close this gap and get around this hazard area, I would really encourage you to look at that.
Matt, is there a traffic light at Ridge Street and Redwood Highway?
There is no traffic
There's no
light
traffic
here,
light.
but as part of this project, I believe they are putting in a new crosswalk here and some new like signage to say pedestrian crossing here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we comment at all?
Sure, go ahead. If you got questions, let's just do a question first.
Okay,
Go ahead. Do you have any questions?
well, no, I mean, I like this map. That's really good. Because if you did get that little horseshoe in there where the railroad grade, you're also connecting in to the rest of we call it the swamp out there.
Right, the pathway out here.
Yeah,
It
and
goes down to the
they
village.
have done some nice improvements to get out there, so improving that spot from Warrenham back to the main road was the old railroad bed there, opens up a lot of access for the whole town from that spot. And that is interesting because that, where you go in Industrial Way, these are all questions, Bob. You go Industrial Way down Rich Street. I mean, that's not that far. I've actually never done that extra little piece there, but that does get you away from Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
So it's kind of brilliant. And maybe that's like going through spots in
And
Richmond.
you could also, the orange line could also go on Industrial Way because there is a signal there.
Yeah,
And then that would also connect to this path. But I think Industrial has a little more traffic and Rich Street has a little less traffic.
yeah, and that could work nice.
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, thanks.
Does anybody else have questions for Matt? No? Okay.
There's one more.
Oh, we got one more public comment, Mr. Bundy.
Let me continue with this.
Okay, keep rolling.
But I agree completely that I've always thought this was a better plan for doing this in the short run. I had been involved in talking to Booth and Little to see if they would allow passage through there. I thought that the request for the money to go through the RV park was really almost prohibitively expensive to cut through there. And so I've always thought this would be a good short-term solution or potentially long-term solution. And, you know, Rich Concrete's been there a long time. I don't know if they'll always be there, but as Matthew says, there's not that much traffic on this road. Now, it needs to be improved a little bit and worked on. The other thing that I like about this is I've always thought this would be a good safe routes to school, you know, for kids coming across here and then ultimately going out this way, as Tom suggested, because then that, you know, gets you out from, you know, well, you have to get over to the trail. But you know, this would be also a nice pathway on that. So I would totally support this. I think the issue of getting through the Marin RV park, because there's a problem with coming down off the levee and getting the right of ways to get through there. And if they're not going to give it up easily or not wanting to give it up easily, which is what happened with Booth and Little, then this is a great alternative.
I have a question for you, Mr. Bundy, or you, Mr. Hartzell. I'm coming southbound on my bike down Old Redwood Highway. How are you gonna make me make that left turn onto Rich Street instead of just blowing through that crazy intersection and going past Trader Joe's? What's gonna make me make a left turn and make that big detour?
So there's actually a ramp that's being installed as part of that path to get people onto the street there. Because if you don't get off the path, then you're kind of stuck at the pedestrian overcrossing. So if you're trying to just go straight down Old Redwood Highway, Larkspur's building a ramp to let you off that path. So you'd probably want some sort of signage to say, this is the route to the North-South Greenway, the Greenway route, to get south towards the Sandra Marker Trail.
So you think we can make people make that turn and take this even though it's out of their way?
I think that, like David Bell and I often ride that, on a Sunday morning, and we'll go down Redwood. There isn't that much traffic at that time.
Yeah.
But if I'm gonna go, this direction and go to San Rafael later in the day and there's a lot of traffic, out there, then I'm gonna take this route, especially if it's a nice paved route that maybe takes, 2 minutes more. And I'm trying to get exercise anyway.
Right, okay.
So those are my thoughts.
You have a question for,
Not a question.
okay, you comment?
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second, we may have one more public speak. Dave, no, David, you know what? It's your chance. Okay. Then I think we.
Sure, I have one online.
There's one online, yeah, public comment online, okay.
Gene, go ahead and unmute.
I would love to see Corte Madera fix that. The Corte Madera curve, which is Corte Madera's own land, it would be a low-hanging fruit and would be just terrific. It's really hard for me to ride my bike on it because it's got some big rolling river gravel on it, so it bumps me all over the place. And then I get up onto the rough gravel on the smart right away. So, yeah, get me to industrial. That would be a huge improvement. I actually raised my hand because I wanted to know if there's any way to accelerate the Warnham path being repaved, because the routes are far worse right now than they've been. They kind of got better. I think Public Works did something to cover some of the routes, but is there any way we can not wait till next year to fix the Warnham pathway? I would really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Anybody else on?
No one else online.
Okay, then
Wait,
we will close public comment. Okay, and you want to comment?
Yes.
Well, please do.
On the Corte Madera segment there, it would be really nice to have access to the Cost Plus shopping center. I think there is kind of an informal path now that you can connect if you go along the gravel, and then it's kind of behind, it's really actually where, where Pat has drawn the arrow to Corte Madera town limits, right about in that area. There's a way to get from the informal path that exists and actually cross over to the Cost Plus Plaza, and that would be
Right
a
into
real, right in there.
On that rear parking lot, that sort of overflow or employee parking lot that, usually is mostly used by people parking and going out on the marsh.
Yeah,
Dog walking.
it'd be real advantage so that people could actually get to that shopping center on their bikes or by walking instead of going on Redwood Highway.
So a back way into.
A back way into
Yeah,
the.
back way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna close public comment. And we're back to the BPAC for discussion and I guess potential recommendations on what we've heard. Does that make sense?
Well, it's just an update, but
It's just an update, but
yeah,
there's been some ideas thrown out. Maybe you want to hear something. I don't know.
sure.
If anybody wants to make a recommendation, we can do that. Being pretty loose with protocol here, so go ahead. Oh.
I like this idea a lot because we could wait for decades to get through the Marin RV park, which we've already been stonewalled or held hostage to that in the past. And if we already have public right of way, I've ridden that past the nice yellow path there a million times. I kind of like it, but on a mountain bike, it's no big deal. But if that was improved and connected in with the other roads, you have access to the marsh or the swamps, things like that is a huge advantage for everybody from Larkspur to Corte Madera. And then, yeah, to have something about a left turn into Industrial Way, a right on Rich, and then you're back to going over to Larkspur Ferry in the tunnel. I think it's brilliant with nothing other than signage and maybe some cool sharrows through that area. Like you're riding through a piece of Richmond over there.
So as a next step, you'd be interested in seeing staff take a look at this and maybe come to us with a proposal as to how this might work.
Yes.
Well, I mean, like I said, Tam's kind of running this project,
Oh,
and,
okay.
and that was all in Larkspur. So it would be a little tricky because, yeah, it's in multiple jurisdictions. Our portion is next to Shorebird Marsh, but it goes across Smart right away, and then the rest of it's through Larkspur. So, and then the main roadblock right now is funding. They can't proceed with any more design until they find the funding source. So that's kind of what's holding them up at this point.
But couldn't Corte Madera independently decide to seek grant money to develop the Corte Madera section?
It's possible. I'm not sure. I haven't heard what's been discussed in the past about that, so I'd have to check in, but I think it's possible. It's our right of way, so.
Yeah, but it'd be hard we'd have to coordinate this with, at a minimum, Larkspur, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because Tam's already trying to do it, and then, yeah, Larkspur, the rest of it's in Larkspur. So if we only did the portion of Corte Madera, it really wouldn't take you anywhere.
I know the Corte Madera Tam rep pretty well. I'm gonna see her shortly, so I can. Talk to her about it.
Yeah. Mr. On.
I'm sorry, anybody else? Any other further direction or?
So back, just the section that this was started with, which is the northern extension. That's been bid by Gelati and it's on the consent calendar for the November 15th Larkspur City Council. So that should probably get up. And do you know the date that they're going to begin construction once it's approved, the funding is approved?
They weren't sure. Larkspur was saying they weren't sure if they could build it in the winter, so they might have to wait until spring. They're still figuring that part out, but they were planning to award it shortly, so.
For what it's worth, it was quite a big turnout at the last Larkspur City Council meeting because it was a bit of a nail biter. The approval of this was on the consent calendar, but was pulled by the most recent council member who was dead set against it. And so it was kind of touch and go as to whether this would get built. And fortunately, it was approved. Larkspur is missing a council person, so it's I think there's only 4 people on the council. Yeah. So I'm all for that northern section getting built as soon as it can.
So I'm not clear if we wanted to push further on something like this. I mean, are you in favor of something like this?
I'd love to have Pat explore it with Tim or staff explore it with Tim.
How would we, what would be the way to proceed?
I guess the next step, I would have to talk to RJ because he's been more involved with discussions with Tam, but I think next step would be talking to Tam about what else we could do, basically.
Okay.
It's their lead, so.
Okay, so you have direction from us. I mean, it's been presented by the public and we said we're interested in it and you guys can figure out what we need to do from here to try to make it.
You're referring to rerouting the southern segment.
Yeah, rerouting it so that we don't have to deal with the
Okay.
RV park. I've been dealing with this for 10 years and the RV park has been a problem the whole time and now it sounds like it's become an insurmountable problem, so. Okay. Anything else on North-South Greenway gap closure?
I just have one question. If I
Yes.
could say it.
Please.
The northern segment, how close does that end to Rich Street there?
It'll go past Rich
Goes a
Street.
little bit past
To the
it.
pedestrian overcrossing. So it's past Rich.
Gotcha, okay, but maybe there could be a little sweeper that would be an option to get off and go to Rich Street, maybe.
I believe, after you said
I think there is a ramp there.
A ramp on Rich,
People,
to
bikes
Rich
going
Street.
straight down south on Old Redwood Highway will want to get off of that path at that point to get into the street,
Yeah,
to go through the industrial intersection.
it's an interesting little maneuver.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, I think that's it for item 7A, North-South Greenway Gap Closure Project. Future agenda items? David?
At the last BPAC, I requested that we look into improving pedestrian sight lines near our uncontrolled crosswalks. And I volunteer to take some photos, although you guys have probably seen it. Both Larkspur and Mill Valley has done a great job of restricting traffic within 15 feet, let's say, of crosswalks using striping and bollards. So it's much easier to see somebody starting to be into the crosswalks. And I'd love to see better pedestrian safety and those improvements for our own crosswalks here in Corte Madera. The other thing that I was hoping we could get sort of not a big full-blown presentation, but there is this assembly bill that allows cities and towns greater leeway to set speed limits without using the 85 percentile. I haven't read the bill, but if you or RJ know enough about it to give a brief presentation on what freedom the town council would have to thinking about speed reduction in town, that doesn't require, the studies that have historically prevented towns and cities from reducing speeds. This doesn't have to come up on the next meeting, but every so often the Central Marin Police Authority Traffic Division would come into the BPAC and do a little presentation about pedestrian and people on bikes, safety and incidents and collisions, as well as just general updates about traffic in town of Corte Madera. So if they're wanting to come back and talk to us at some point, that would be great. And then finally, I think the town, in response to some BPAC suggestions, had some banners made that were signage to give people on bikes 3 feet. And I don't know if you've ever received them, but I've never seen them go up. And so if we can get them on some sort of schedule for back to school and whatnot, or summertime and back to school, that would be great.
Okay, I can look into that. I'm not sure where those ended up. For the increasing visibility, is there certain locations or streets?
Well, one that's really easy is if you go down Corte Madera Avenue to Magnolia, going to Larkspur, you'll notice every crosswalk that they're using the bollards that prevent you from parking right up to the crosswalk. And I can't tell you what.
At Prince Royal, I think, is an example of what David's talking about. What you did there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so like painted islands with.
Yeah, I think that's really effective at Spindrift and Prince Royal. I think Cove School was requesting that.
Yeah.
I think we lost a crossing guard there, so
yeah,
that was part of the.
And I can't point you to a specific intersection or crosswalk in Mill Valley, but it seems like a town-wide project that they try to improve their crosswalks by eliminating the parking by using bollards.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a question.
Go ahead.
In my walking around Madera Gardens, I find not often, but often enough that I think it's a problem sometimes that vegetation, hedge will impinge into the sidewalk, and sometimes a person has half the sidewalk left. And if you're, we don't have many wheelchairs out in public, but I think people should be able to use the sidewalk that's there. And so I don't know how that can be addressed at code enforcement, or if that is a issue that the town can address. So I'd like some discussion, research and some discussion about that. Inform us, I guess.
Sure.
Anything else? Nope. Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you all.